All right. I am here with Doug Camplejohn, founder and CEO of Airspeed. Great to have you on the show today.
Great to be here. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So Airspeed is a company that helps us make our employees happier and celebrate our employees. So obviously a really noble cause, which I'm really happy to dig in with you today. But first, I'd love to hear about your background. You're a veteran in the tech industry. You've been an executive at companies like LinkedIn and Salesforce, and has founded multiple companies and seen exits and all that. So you've obviously been through this rodeo several times. So just tell me about sort of what got you on this journey in technology and entrepreneurship, and ultimately to where you are today.
So my journey in Silicon Valley started off at Apple. So I went to Carnegie Mellon for engineering, ended up not doing any coding or engineering work because I discovered something called product management at Apple and kind of fell in love with that. And it was probably the closest I could get to being a CEO without being a CEO at 21. It was kind of like all the responsibility, all the responsibility, none of the authority. So I was in charge of a product called QuickTime at Apple, which I'm pretty proud of, which is kind of the underlying operating system for all the audio and video stuff that we use today. And it's kind of been startups ever since. So, I got the bug at Apple and really learned a lot about how to design beautiful products and really listen to the customer and principles that have served me well my entire career. And then I wanted to go build a culture. And so I figured the best way to go do that was to go be in a startup. And so I joined a couple that didn't do so well, but learned a lot in that process as well. And then went off and started my own. I've done this. Airspeed is actually my fourth company. So the first one was called MyPlay. It was an idea of a digital music locker way before iTunes and iPods. So right idea, wrong time, but still had a successful exit to Bertelsmann. Then I joined a startup in the security space and started my second company, Mi5 Networks, which was like as spyware was really starting to proliferate. We were trying to figure out how to do that for corporate networks at the edge of the network with an appliance. And the last one was Fliptop, which was machine learning for sales and marketing. And we were acquired by LinkedIn in 2015. So I spent about 4 years there running the Sales Navigator team, and took that from about a $250 million business to almost $1 billion business, and it's over $1 billion now. And then got pulled away to Salesforce to go be the general manager of Sales Cloud.
Wow. Phenomenal. So you're at these really big companies, and then, you went back to the startup again. So how did that transition happen?
Yeah, I'm fundamentally a startup guy. So LinkedIn was actually kind of surprising because they originally didn't have a position for me and said, "Would you mind if we just vested you out fully?" And I was like, "Sounds great." And then the CEO Jeff Weiner at the time came back a couple months later and said, "Actually, we think you're the right guy to do this," and they made it interesting to stick around. And only asked me, like, you just need to commit to 18 months. So I'm like, okay, I can do anything for 18 months. And 18 months in, had kind of rebuilt the team, rebuilt the roadmap. And I'm like, I'm actually having kind of fun here. So really enjoyed that environment. And I think LinkedIn is one of the very well-run larger companies, even within Microsoft. So I think that's pretty amazing how they've been able to maintain that kind of product and startup culture. Then joined Salesforce in February of 2020. So you can imagine how that played out. So 6 weeks later, the world looked like this. And on the one hand, I love it. I never want to go back to an office 5 days a week ever again. I love working from anywhere in most of the world. But I miss people, right? And so, we did all the same shit that everybody did at the time. It was like, oh, we're going to do Zoom happy hours and Zoom yoga and, set up a bunch of new Slack channels and have more all hands meetings where we're recognizing people. And in the process of doing that, it was really a understanding that this stuff is scattered all over the place. There's no system of record for culture. There's no operating system for culture. It's all in these little these folders and channels that just disappear, right? So you introduce yourself in a Slack channel. You say, "Hi, Eric, I'm Doug. I just joined the company," and that just washes downstream, kind of never to be found again. So that was the light bulb moment for me for Airspeed, and say, hey, I think there's actually, more than just a good noble cause. It's there's, I think, a really interesting platform to be built and an interesting business to be built around helping employees feel more connected and celebrated with the hypothesis that when employees are feeling connected, they're going to be a lot more productive and a lot more, likely to stay at the company for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's phenomenal. So as an executive coach, when we went remote, I did a lot of research and was really trying to understand how the shift to remote was affecting teams. And what I found was basically what you're saying, that it really disintegrated the bond between teams and really increased a lot of attrition. So especially at the time when salaries were coming at an all-time high, and now attrition was increasing. And so basically people became more transactional and opportunistic with their employers. And that's obviously, not great for business, especially for the smaller startups that are sort of, cash strapped and really just can't afford to pay those FANG prices.
Yeah.
And so we did a lot of work around, like how do we bring people together and create bonds, and the Zoom happy hour is not the answer. Asking somebody to sit on another Zoom call with a drink in their hand at 5 p.m. is not the answer to
It's one of the most awkward things in the world. And fortunately, it died pretty quickly because people realize that. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we actually did a survey that's on our big survey. We partnered with this company, Workplace Intelligence, and interviewed like 1,600 people, 800 execs and 800 individual contributors in the kind of, the kind of depths of COVID. And really found like that was your word transactional was spot on. This feeling of like my life is now back-to-back Zoom meetings. And so if I don't feel connected to the people I'm working with and I don't feel connected to the mission of the company, I can easily just Zoom for somebody else. Right. And so that kind of loyalty just kind of went out the window. And, one of the things that was fascinating to me at LinkedIn, going from a 30-person company roughly to a 10,000 plus employee company, was watching how deliberate Jeff Weiner and that executive team was in cascading communications. I mean, it was a system, a factory of like figuring out the message of the exec team, spreading it to the exec team, spreading it to the top 250 leaders, spreading it down to, through managers, doing all hands, and kind of repeating that until everybody was getting the same message. And it really was fascinating for me to watch. And what I realized during COVID is executives now have to be as deliberate about cascading culture. You just can't say, well, we're going to just bump into each other in the cafeteria and it's going to work.
Right. Yeah. So another study that I found was that was basically they were trying to look at how much time we invested in culture and in bonding in the workplace through lunches, coffee breaks, happy hours, bumping into people in the hallway. And it was about 2.5 hours a day on average is what they came up with, which obviously seems reasonable. And so then we went to Zoom and that just evaporated.
Yeah.
Nobody was spending any time. So we were already paying that money and investing that time in creating those bonds. And so now we have to do something to replace it. And, most of us haven't. So, so what do you think? What are the sort of core pillars or things that companies can and should do to try to create that culture in a remote world?
Yeah, and I think that one of the mistakes that people assume this is only a remote work problem, and the reality is this is a work problem, period, and it's always existed. It's just that COVID suddenly gave us all this tremendous dose of empathy because we realized, oh, this is what the India office has been dealing with, or this is what the remote sales team has been working with, or even my group was all on one floor and we suddenly split to 2 floors in the same building. Like, and a lot of times you might as well just as well be remote then. So I think that's one of the things we realized quickly was we started this because of the pandemic and because we were a remote company, but we realized this applies to everyone. And I don't, by the way, like I like people. It's, this is not about like, I never want to see people again. So we actually, as a company, still get together quarterly. We put everybody on a plane, get together somewhere fun, and mostly don't have meetings. Mostly it's just like hanging out and doing activities and volunteering and stuff like that. Because I think that's important as well. But I do think you have to be very deliberate about these moments of an employee's journey. And the way I almost think about it is imagine you're doing the going away card for an employee, like, or writing the yearbook of their time at your company. What would be those significant moments and photos that you can kind of string together for them? And that's how we kind of lined up our apps. So we have an app called Intros, for example. So you drop it. These are all Slack apps, and they're all free right now. So you drop it into a Slack channel and you say, hey, listen, everybody who joins our company answers these 5 questions about themselves. What's the first rock concert you went to? What's the first concert you went to? What's, something we'd be surprised to know about you? What's one thing on your LinkedIn profile? However you want to kind of put it together. But you're now not just dropping that into a Slack channel, you're putting it into a database. So that can go, you can find people with similar interests later on, et cetera. How do you make sure you're never missing a birthday or work anniversary? Right now, you've got a bunch of admins who are chasing people around being like, hey, would you sign this digital card and doing all this? So we kind of put that on autopilot. So you can just kind of install celebrations and we do all the reminders and all the card delivery stuff at once. Obviously, recognition is huge, right? Recognition is how to give recognition. And there's lots of apps that do like, hey, let me go give you direct recognition. One of the things that I love about our app, Shoutouts, is you can actually nominate somebody for recognition. So if you're like, yeah, I could recognize this person directly, but it'd actually be a lot more effective coming from the CEO or coming from this VP. You can basically say, this person did this, it had this impact, kind of reflected these company values. Let me go forward that to a Slack message, and that person can go, looks great, let me send as if it's me, or, obviously edit in their tone. And then 2 more that we have right now, and then 1 more that's coming shortly, but will be out before this podcast. So we have icebreakers. I used to do this thing at LinkedIn and Salesforce where we'd go around the room saying, what's a shout out? What's a personal win? And the personal win, and, you'd get these great stories about like, I bought a house, I just got engaged, I, remodeled my, office, whatever. But one is, it was just words. So pictures are really powerful in that. And 2 is it would take a hell of a long time. Like if we have 15 people in a room, that's like half an hour of your meeting. It's just going around the circle. So we now do this thing in our company meeting. We use our own app, Icebreakers. And so the day before, a message goes out and says, hey, what's a personal win for you? People are posting photos. I take 5 minutes, 10 minutes tops of our company meeting and just say like, hey, oh my God, you were at the soccer game and you were like, so it's just a fun way for us to kind of get that personal connection. And then finally, and I'll take a break. Finally, we have maps, which is just really fun because in this remote work world, you don't really know where people are often working from. And we're not tracking you. We're just saying, what's your home office location? And the cool thing, and by the way, most of these were just apps I wanted for myself. I just wanted to build how most companies start. So this was hey, I'm making a trip to New York. Who's in the New York area? So I can zoom in on the map and I can say, oh, let me go check these people. Let me send them a Slack message saying, hey, I'm around Tuesday or Thursday. Anybody want to go grab dinner? So these are all just different moments of culture. And although these are separate apps, they're all coming back into the same back-end database. So you can start to do some interesting things with it down the line.
Wow. So what have been some of maybe the highlights or fun success stories that you've seen either in your team or with some of your customers?
Yeah, so we just launched. So we're recording this in May of 23. We just launched in the Slack App Store the apps between 4 to 8 weeks ago. So it's still early days, but we have already over 1,000 customers, companies using the apps. We have over 40,000 users on the app. So early signs are good and
good start.
Really high weekly engagement, over 50%. A couple of things that have been surprising. I think the intros in the Maps app have been especially appealing to communities, Slack communities. So we've got like women in tech communities or investor communities, and like hundreds of people, in some cases, who are just like, yeah, this is a great way for us to get to know each other or plan meetups when we're going to be in each other's cities. So that was not something we kind of anticipated. I think we've also, another early insight was what we call the rule of 50. It seems like 50 people is a tipping point for when the engagement gets much higher. So, not to say, we're obviously below 50 right now, and lots of our customers are, but that seems to be a point where like you're really locked in. It's kind of like that Facebook adage, you get 10 friends in 7 days or whatever it is, and you're a customer for life. I think once we have like 50 people who are on, a product or products of ours, that's kind of when they're locked in and we're seeing engagement really kick in higher on average. I think that, so yeah, those are kind of the early days of things. I think that we found, right now in larger organizations, we need to start doing HR integration. So that's coming this summer. So we're going to integrate with Bamboo and Workday and, Rippling and all the and Gusto and all the leading HR and payroll platforms, so that you can just automate all this stuff. People can just automate where people are and, birthdays and celebration stuff. I'd say those are some of the early insights right now, but everything we're doing as a company, we're kind of in what we call this early access period. So the apps are all going to be free through the end of the year. And all we're focused on is just like, how do we kind of optimize engagement and remove any friction?
Yeah. Well, definitely. So a couple of things that you said that I really enjoy. One is around the icebreakers. That is something where, like I said, the Zoom happy hour doesn't work. People have tried different ways of doing it. And one of the things that I found with some of my clients that has worked really well is just 5 minutes, either, at least in the team meetings, right? Maybe not every single meeting, but having 5 minutes in the team meetings to just have a little bit of fun. And so I actually have like this list of funny icebreaker questions that I'll share out and stuff. And so it just might be something like, your favorite rock concert or your favorite trip or something a little bit off color, depending on the culture of the team. But, just something where people share and actually just get to know a little bit more about each other. There's one example that I love where there was this development team, and one of the engineers was this big, burly dude, like big guy. He was probably like 6'5", like long gray, like ZZ Top beard, baritone voice, right? Nice guy, but like, a little intimidating, right? And in one of these icebreakers, he shared that he liked to breed butterflies in his backyard. And so we were all just imagining, him just sort of prancing around and twirling and with all the butterflies swirling around him. And all of a sudden we realized, holy crap, this guy is just a big teddy bear.
Yeah.
And then from that point on, the culture, or at least the way that we all engaged in that team was drastically changed from a simple icebreaker question. So I love those kinds of things, to get people to not just break the ice, but really break down the walls between each other. Because even in teams that have been together for a long time, especially in kind of an enterprise setting, we never really get to know each other. Yeah. And so I love it.
Yeah, that's actually, it's funny you mentioned that. Like we kind of got the band back together when we put Airspeed together. So we got pulled some of the top people from Fliptop, my last company. And some of these people I've been working with for like 10 plus years. I've probably learned more about them in the last, 3 or 4 months than I did in the previous 10, in terms of their, hobbies and personal life and all that kind of stuff. And it's fun. It's fun to kind of get that information. One of our advisors connected with my marketing director, and they're both like dumpling connoisseurs. And so they're geeking out on great dumpling restaurants and stuff like that.
Oh, nice.
And that's the kind of stuff as a team. It sounds like, I know there's people who are just all about productivity, and might view this as kind of like, a little foo-foo. But what I've found, I think you've found as well, is, when you've got smart people who are great at what they do, all aligned on a mission, like we know we're heading in this direction, and they've built that trust layer, then they're crazy productive. And that trust layer comes about like getting to know them as a person, not just, somebody in a Zoom Hollywood Squares kind of screen.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So, also too, I was an agile coach for many years, and my philosophy is all around continuous improvement. Right. And that continuous improvement really stems from our ability to give each other feedback and to speak openly about the problems that we're facing, either within ourselves, with our company, with each other. And what I find then is that the number one thing that drives or impacts continuous improvement is psychological safety.
Yeah.
So if a team feels that they can safely open up and be vulnerable or share feedback without it being seen as being, antagonistic, those are the teams that fix their issues and that improve and that, ultimately get the productivity that we're all striving for.
Yeah.
And so this is how you do it.
Absolutely. And I think people focus more on the hours you're in the office or number of meetings and these metrics that are actually the wrong way to look at it. Right.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. No, the longer you make somebody the longer you make an unmotivated person sit in the office, the more creative they will get in terms of wasting time.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So tell me about, you've obviously been a leader and a founder for many, many years. Do you have sort of a leadership philosophy or any pillars or principles? that you focus on?
Yeah, I've kind of developed a number of them over time. I mean, I think that in general, my view of leadership is when someone wants to describe it to me as the CEO is the MVP, but it doesn't stand for most valuable player. It stands for money, vision, and people. So that I kind of always come back to that little phrase and go, that's my job, right? And the number one thing is people, and we'll talk more. I'll double click on that because I've got a lot of thoughts around that, kind of hiring and firing and retention. The money is, obviously don't ever run out of money, and build a great revenue stream. And the vision is a lot of what I spend my time on. And I think that my general philosophy is be kind of firm on the end state, but be flexible on the path. So we, from day one, said we're on a mission to help employees feel more connected and celebrated. And I love that phrase because I'm like, I could go do that for 100 years, right? I'm like, we're never going to run out of things to do if that's our mission. But the path is changed. Like we originally made a mistake and thought, oh, well, this is really kind of like an internal Instagram app, and it's all about photos. And so we spent probably way too much time building this beautiful mobile app and rolled it out at the end of last year. And the crickets chirped, right? It was like, yeah, this is great, except I live on my laptop and I live in Slack, right? And so come back to me when you can help me there. And after we heard that enough and kind of got smacked in the forehead enough, we're like, oh, okay, maybe we should listen to that. And so that's why we've gone down this path. And as I said, the early signs are really good. But I think that's kind of a key thing from the vision side. And as I said earlier, you've got to keep repeating that, keep cascading that. And if that message ever changes, make sure that all the employees in the company can kind of repeat that. The people side is really, we can spend more than a half an hour we have left talking about that. But there's kind of three principles I've come up with over time. On hiring, I have what I call the awesome test. And I've tried everything when you hire people. I've said okay, thumbs up or thumbs down, scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 10, whatever. And all of those things tended to get me B and C players because people are fundamentally, don't like to criticize, other people. They're like, they seemed nice, or I enjoyed their conversation. Their voice goes up an octave or two. And what we do now is our hiring process is about fast process with good feedback. So we generally do a phone screen, and then we try to do all our interviews on one day. And then we say that evening, you've either passed or not passed. So we get back to the person the same day. And then the final step is everybody has to give, if you're customer facing, you have to give a presentation. And it can be on whatever you want, but oftentimes, if you're sales, marketing, or customer success, it's your current or your previous company. And that's really just saying how do you do in communication, and how do you do if we throw you curveball questions? And we've actually weeded out some amazing people who have gone on to really successful careers in that process, but just wasn't a fit for us. Because after that meeting, we go offline and we say, okay, I would look you in the eye in a Zoom call and say, was that person amazing? And if you can't go hell yes, we got to go get that person in, we just move on. Right. And so it's kind of excuse my language, it's fuck yes or hell no. It's kind of the way we think about that for employees. And it means it's a much longer process, but we generally get it right more than we would otherwise. Now, you don't always get it right. So the second test is I stole from Netflix, which is called the keeper test, where you just think about the people on your team. And if anybody on that team was coming to you tomorrow and said, hey, I'm leaving for an equivalent position, would you fight to keep them? And if the answer is no, you should actually start managing them out now, right? You've got the wrong fit. You're just satisficing, not optimizing. And if the answer is yes, oh shit, that would be terrible. You think about, is there anything you would do in that case? Would you give them more responsibility, more salary, more stock, more bigger title? And just do it now, right? Just kind of make that happen. Don't let it ever get to that place. And then the final one is just the fun test. And so what I like to do is just randomly ask people when we're face to face or on a Zoom call, are you having fun? I found people are incredibly bad at lying about that, right? They're just so if they pause and be like, nah, if there's a hesitation or their voice goes up again, there's a problem. Let me go dig into that. So that's kind of been the three things that I've always done in building teams. And my proudest accomplishment as an entrepreneur is, yes, I've made money for investors and made money for employees, but really, if you ask anybody who's been in my companies, they've said that's one of the best places I've ever worked.
Yeah, because they're all keepers, they're all having fun, right?
Yeah. And by the way, like, like no one bats 1,000, right? Like if you're batting,
Right.
750, you're doing amazing, right? And many people bat 500. But I think, I know like we have a phenomenal director of marketing, Lauren, and I frustrated the hell out of her because she was trying to hire our content marketing manager. And we kept saying no, right? And I said, your bar isn't high enough. It's not the awesome test. And these were all, again, really amazing candidates. And finally, the woman we got, Jihan, is just, fantastic. And we're just glad we waited. So that's the process. But it's painful, especially when there's a lot of work to get done, which there always is in a startup.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. So the keeper test really resonates with me. So again, as a continuous improvement evangelist, I bring those principles to every aspect of the business. And so, especially with my, my CEO clients, I do just something where in the same spirit, basically every time we do a performance review, we go through every person in the company and we ask, would you hire this person again today? Would you make the same choice? And if the answer is no, it's not just manage this person out. There's a step in between, which is what went wrong.
Right.
So there's that retrospective that needs to happen here. Was this a failure in hiring? Was this a failure in onboarding? Or is there a systemic failure in the systems or the culture, right? Depending on how long that person has been with the company. And what typically comes out is if it was a mishire, then okay, there's a problem in our hiring process. It's not their fault.
Right.
It was something that they should not have made it through all of those filters.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we hire a great player and we fail to onboard them successfully.
Yeah.
Kind of like you said, right? They come in, hi, my name's Doug. All right, off you go.
Yeah.
Go figure it out, Lord of the Flies style. Yeah. And so I'm and this is the area that I really focus on a lot with my clients because it's where we have the most control. And that is just creating a really robust onboarding system and process. And then the last thing is, something has gone wrong in our team culture, right? Something is, the well has been poisoned somehow. And that's the real deep one. And usually you see that when you actually have multiple people on the same team or in the same department, that again, you say, well, I wouldn't hire that person again today. Right. But to suffice it to say, the purpose of all of this is for us to realize that every person that we don't like or we don't think is a good fit, we had some responsibility.
Absolutely.
Right.
But I think what I find in a lot of organizations is because, the amazing players are easy. The really shitty players are easy. But people in between, it's really hard because you're like, well, they're mostly doing a good job. And like for a lot of people, it's hard to let that go. But you are poisoning your culture with every day you keep them on, right? You're basically lowering the standards. And you're having people who are super productive and high performers go like, well, why should I work so hard? That person is, kind of screwing up. So I think that's really important. And, you mentioned kind of the kind of having a good journey in the company. One of the apps that'll be out by the time this airs that we're releasing in June is called Coffee Talk. And it's kind of like a competitor to a Slack app called Donut. And it's all about like, how do you find those buddies? How do you find those connections inside the company that you may not have normally? Like, because you're obviously going to build a relationship with your manager, you're going to build a relationship with the people that you work with on a daily, weekly basis. But like, especially in large organizations like LinkedIn, I was on a team of hundreds and hundreds of people. And they're like, most of them I didn't know on any basis. So we would, like an app like Coffee Talk would come in and we're actually, rather than just randomly matching you to a person, we're using AI to say, just answer 2 questions. What kind of people do you want to meet? What do you want to talk about? And then using that signal along with the people who have opted in to have these meetings, we're kind of doing this smart matching to kind of find you somebody like, and it might be that like you both love snowboarding. And so you can go talk about that and you've got nothing else in common. Or it might be that you said, I really want to meet people in customer success and go talk to them and do it that way. So that one I'm really excited about as well, of kind of building some of those bonds inside the company.
Yeah. I like that a lot, actually. Yeah, there's an app I think called it's a Donut
Donut's the
that
one that's
does
out there right now. Yeah.
something kind of similar. And I really enjoyed that when I would work, even again as a coach, where I'd work in larger organizations or with larger clients. Because yeah, we get these, we get the silos, we get these big organizations that we can't really navigate. And again, like you want to make friends at your company
Yeah.
and not just work friends, but like real friends, because this is where you're spending most of your life.
Yeah.
So wouldn't it be great if you could bond with people at your company and they don't have to be, your direct coworkers?
Yeah, and Donut's been a great app. It's been around for a few years, but it kind of is pretty random. So like when we've tried
Yeah.
it in the
Oh,
past,
totally.
it'll just match you to anybody who's in the channel. And it might be
Yeah.
somebody I've known for 10 years and meet with on a daily basis, and it's kind of like not worthwhile. So we try to our approach was how do we kind of gather a little bit more information and make it a little bit more deliberate so we can kind of make that. And then we actually take the information from that you've put into these other apps or in your profile or what you said you want to talk about. And we almost have like a conversation starter Slack message that goes to you 10 minutes before the meeting. Like, hey, it might be nice to talk to Doug about this. Hey, it could be cool to talk to Eric about this. And, kind of get the ball rolling. So that's kind of another fun way to go make that happen.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I want to back up a little bit because I want to get back to your 3 points around hiring.
Sure.
The awesome test.
Yeah.
So this is something where I feel like a lot of companies struggle in that, if you set a really high bar, it means you got to get a really robust pipeline of candidates. Yeah. And I think we're all stuck in this mode of like, well, it's, we've got a batch of 8 or a batch of 10, and we're just going to pick the best one, even though they're not that great. And I say like, nah, it's not good enough, right? Your bar should be, you wait until you get the right one. So what are some of the things that you think companies can do either to get a better pipeline of people or again, just to be able to afford to be more patient, I guess?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we do a couple things. We like right now we're kind of have the core team locked and loaded. We're not actively hiring, but we keep all the job descriptions up on our job board and keep going through folks in Greenhouse. So because it's like ABH is our motto, always be hiring, right? Always be recruiting, right? Mm-hmm. And so we are constantly looking at resumes and saying, like, you look great. We don't have an open position right now, but let's, even like, let's do a Zoom call to get to know each other, or if you're willing, or if you don't mind, would love to talk to you when we have a position open in the future. So we're always keeping that funnel going. That's one. The other thing we've done on kind of semi-regular basis, we do at least once a quarter, sometimes more, is we do the kind of awesome test exercise. And so we kind of get everybody on a Zoom call. And sometimes we'll do this one-on-one with my HR person when an employee joins. And we just say, great, open up LinkedIn, filter by first degree connections, go page by page, and just anybody who's awesome, right? And we just put it in a spreadsheet. So we're like, Eric is awesome. Here's where he's at right now. Here's a link to his profile. Here's why. Because you don't have any of that context. I can know that you and I are connected, but nobody knows like how will I know you or vice versa. And so it's all these things. And we just say, don't have a filter. Like if you're friends with Barack Obama, like put Obama in there and say why he's awesome. Not that we're ever going to have a shot at hiring him. Right. And so we built up this awesome list spreadsheet, which is kind of our, kind of value added recruiting pipeline. So when I open up a position, I go to the marketing tab and go, who are all the folks that everybody's ever said is awesome for marketing? And that's where we're going to go start.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. And I think what you're talking about here too is something that I rail on a lot, which is recruiting is an offensive strategy, not a defensive one, which means you have to go out there and find the people. The days of I'm going to post a thing on a job board and cast a wide net and see who falls in the bucket. You're not going to get good people because the good people are out there doing awesome things at other companies.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that like, my plan is to interview, I think Reid Hoffman did this at LinkedIn, interview everyone up to the first 500 employees personally. And so stay really involved in that process and don't delegate it. I think that just being able to probably it depends on your company size and your growth rate, but I would generally say, between Series A and Series B, bring on a full-time recruiter in-house and just have that person like constantly sourcing, constantly thinking. And then we're in that Kanban kind of continuous improvement. we're always saying, like, we think we pay a lot of attention to like our greenhouse, ratings, or Glassdoor ratings rather. And like, so we're asking people like, how was your interview process, right? Even if we didn't give you an offer, we want you to still say, shit, that was amazing. I wish I could work there, right? And so we're constantly trying to figure out how do we just improve every piece of that, even if we're not in a big hiring spurt.
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned that. So between Series A and Series B, you're in the kind of early stages of growth, but I think that's a time where executives are still really focused on the product and nailing down product market fit, and they're not quite ready to scale up yet. But once it's time to scale up, it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you just don't ever want a cold start on that, right? Because that's when you end up being like, okay, I'm just going to hand it to a recruiting firm. And trust me, I've used recruiting firms. There's great recruiting firms out there. We've used, like Betts Recruiting has been a fantastic one for sales, marketing, and customer success. But we still post on our own website. We still post an angel list. We still post on LinkedIn. We're still keeping all our pipeline going. So we're doing, you have to think about it just like a sales funnel. You can't just say, I'm going to turn off all the marketing, and then when we're ready, we'll turn marketing on, or I'm not going to have any sales, and then suddenly I need to go 0 to 1 million revenue, and we'll hire some salespeople. Right. This stuff takes time.
Right. And if you wait too long, now you're in that reactive mode. Right. You're desperate, and you're just hiring whoever you can at the time, and you're going to make some bad hires, and you're going to get stuck in that vicious cycle because the bad hires are going to hire more bad people, and so on and so forth.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. So I want to ask a little bit more about your leadership philosophy as well. So obviously we've been talking a lot about culture. What are your ideas or philosophy around establishing and nurturing a great company culture?
Yeah, mine is, it's kind of a trust but verify, going back to nuclear era state.
Yeah.
My general sense is like when I hire people, I'm really fortunate in this time is that like I got to bring on some people that, we've worked together for, as I said, for 10 plus years. So we're like an old married couple. We finish each other's sentences, and, it's just like that trust is so great. So there's none of that process there, but somebody new, I'm generally spending a bunch of time with them up front, and I might have them shadow me if they're doing something, and then I shadow them. But pretty quickly, like I want to go to a point within 30 or even 90 days at most. And I'll talk about that in a minute, where I just go, you got this. You're better at this than I am. I'm here to support you. Tell me if you need me to, run interference for you or get you more resource. Like that's my job. My job is to help them be successful. One of the things we do, and I've done this in the last 2 companies as well, is we actually, I always give the culture presentation on their first day. And part of that is saying, by the way, we're going to put a meeting on your calendar 90 days out. And that is going to be meeting with your manager to see if it's working for both of you. And it's like, I always feel a little bad doing it on their first day because I'm basically saying we could fire you in 90 days. But I think it's really important to have a deadline. And I have never, ever had an employee where I didn't know within 90 days whether it was working or not. And vice versa, probably. But oftentimes that drags on for 6, 9, 12, beyond months when you're finally like, okay, it's a year and a half. We should let that person go. So we basically say it's either, for both parties, it's a hell yes, or in some cases there might be a little bit of course correction. But I think it's really important to have something, some timeline there, and that first 90 days mapped out. So I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in kind of communication, and everybody contributes to everything. So we do our company meeting every Thursday at 8 a.m. because we have folks all over the world, and we use our own icebreaker product, as I mentioned, and kind of kick it off that way. And then everybody's kind of running their own, talking about their own part of the business, but everybody is contributing to product. So we do a bug bash every single week, right? So everybody is hands-on. We're guiding that. You're going to test this. You're going to make it happen. We record every customer conversation we have. That gets thrown into a Slack channel. So we're like listening to customers all the time. We are doing user testing where we're like, okay, we're going to like one-way mirror kind of virtual and see how you're using the product. So I'm a big believer, like, just make all the information open. So like, here's the metrics. Here's how we're doing, and share bad news as well as good news. Like, and be really clear, like, hey, this is the next milestone we need to hit. And if we don't do this, we're going to have trouble raising our next round. Or here's the kind of things that we need to do to the product. and here's how we prioritize that. So a lot of it's just like really rapid turnaround and really open communication.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. So what you're talking about here, I'm glad. I mean, everything you're saying is like totally resonating with me, which is great. So there's lots of stuff to go back and forth on. But what I talk about, especially with my, I run a startup accelerator. It's the Chaos to Clarity Accelerator. And I work with kind of around the Series A, seed to Series A stage companies. And one of the big things I focus on is your values as the DNA of your company, but your processes and systems are the expression of that DNA, right? So what you're talking about here is your value is transparency. But the way that that plays out is you've got these systems and processes for communication, and the way where we're posting the videos and that's the expression or the behavior that value is expressed by. And so the exercise or the workshop that I have them go through is, just going through an exercise of articulating your values, and then actually going through an exercise that is, well, what are the behaviors that embrace this value? What are the behaviors that go against this value? And then how can we bake that into our systems and processes? Right. So to say, yeah, we value transparency. Okay. So everyone in the company should be able to think for themselves, well, how can I make transparency a part of the way that we work and we do business? And that becomes your sort of to me, that's what a cultural operating system looks like.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like, my last company, I've always believed like one of the biggest advantages startups have is speed. So we would always like continuous development. We're just deploying whenever things are ready. And then we got to LinkedIn, and, there's, tens of thousands of customers. There's, millions of people using the Sales Navigator product. And I remember going to a conference pretty early on where a guy from SAP came to me and said, could you please just give me at least, a week's notice before you release totally new user interface? Because I have hundreds of reps that are using this. I need it and it dawned on me. I'm like, oh, you can't just do startup continuous deployment when you've got a large customer base. And even a small customer base, I don't think you should do it. So we've said this is Airspeed, I think, has the most efficient engineering process I've ever experienced. And it's a nice balance. So what we do is we do road mapping up to 3 months out, right? And then, again, the long-term vision is always there. But we're kind of giving a pretty good month-by-month breakout of like, here's what's coming in June, here's what's coming in July, here's what's coming in August. And then we are kind of stack ranking that within the month. And that's allowing marketing to say, okay, I know what I need to get done on the website. It's allowing customer success to tell customers, okay, I know that's a problem. That's getting fixed in 2 weeks, right? And again, if we have a bug or something like we can hot fix anything at any time. But there's this balance I find. So what we do is we do the Thursday meeting, we do a bug bash, we do a meeting that afternoon that says, okay, what kind of things do we need to fix for production? We roll out a production update on Friday. On Monday, we kind of let people play around with it. On Monday, we're setting it on production. So we're releasing weekly, and we're then telling everybody, like, here's the things that we fixed last week or improved last week. Here's the things we think are coming. So we give engineering some flexibility, but it's this like transparency and communication that allows everybody to stay in sync. And then you don't have fire drills, or you have very few fire drills.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. So I get this excuse, or I get this pushback a lot, where especially with the early stage startups, they don't want a roadmap. They don't want to commit to anything, in the future. And I see this as a trade-off, or let's just say it can cover up an issue, which is we're just disorganized. Yeah. We don't really know where we're going. We don't have a clear vision, and we're just doing these knee-jerk reactions, willy-nilly. And I've tried to impress that, hey, well, you should be organized and you should have a plan, and that plan could change, but it doesn't mean that there isn't value in looking at least a few months out. So is there like a right time or a right stage where you think even a 3-month roadmap makes sense, or maybe doesn't make sense? Or do you think it's just everyone should just have it and everyone's just making excuses?
Yeah, I think everyone should have it. I mean, when you're building your first product, you don't necessarily need a roadmap. You probably have something in your head. But we happen to spend a lot of time talking to customers before we ever wrote a line of code. So we had a sense of where we should prioritize stuff, and kind of rough sequencing. It's not like we said, this is happening month 1, 2, 3, but we're like, we're going to do this first and this and this. And trust me, it's my product manager is definitely has to learn a lot of flexibility working for me because, I have no sacred cows. So like when we did the mobile app and we found it had no data, we like immediately like, that's going on the shelf. We're going to go move to Slack apps, and he had to like rejigger everything. And there's times where I'm like, oh, you know what? We thought we were going to go do this, deep dive on an admin system, but doing this web onboarding is more important. So we're as I said, kind of like very flexible in how we move stuff around, and our engineering process allows us to do that. There's a great quote by a guy I worked with, Tomer Cohen at LinkedIn, who's now Chief Product Officer, that I steal all the time, which is, I may be wrong, but I'm not confused. So, I what I tell the team constantly is like, I know my title is CEO. Don't assume that means that I know what I'm doing all the time, right? I'm going to be wrong too, but I'm going to state things so, firmly. And I have those 3 letters behind my title that you might think, oh, well, Doug must be right. I'm often right, but you're allowed to always say, I think otherwise. Here's data. Here's let me show this. And so we're constantly revising that. And in fact, even the language we use internally is we don't call them, even releases per se. We call them experiments or hypotheses. We have a we're like, okay, we want to go improve conversion from this step to this step. We have hypotheses that we can do that by doing this, and we think the outcome can be, to go from X to Y in Z time frame. Right. And then we build the experiment and run the experiment. And if we're wrong, we're like, OK, what did we get wrong? What did we miss? And just even that language and that philosophy allows you to not feel like, oh, I'm doing a bunch of wasted work.
Oh, that's incredible. OK, so, this is this is what I'm constantly impressing on my clients, especially in the early stage, that product is a scientific method, right? That it's this constant series of assumptions and hypotheses that we're validating, invalidating, testing, and so on. So I'm actually going to make every single one of the members of my accelerator watch this episode, because this is great, and I'm glad that they're not only going to hear it from me. And one of the things that you mentioned too, I think that puts all of this together is again around being able to have a roadmap, because you validated everything with your customers before you started building. So you had that clarity and that certainty. And that's really the foundation of my product philosophy and in the accelerator in general is do the customer engagement, do the market research, and you will have that clarity and certainty that makes everything else much more efficient, right? And much more easy to develop. Yeah. And
it's not to say you're still not going to get it wrong, right? But product management is fundamentally like, how do you do pattern recognition with a sparse data set? And so the more data you have, the better. But my feeling is like a lot of that for me is gut, a lot of that. But I like to have the metrics of what's happening. I like to watch the user, over their shoulder. There's the more data, the better. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to only let the data or the customer interviews drive my decision, because you've got to do the Wayne Gretzky kind of skate to where the hockey puck's going to be, not where it is right now. And oftentimes customers will just tell you a whiter, brighter, faster version of what they're using today, or the metrics will lead you down some path, which is a local optimization. So you need to be able to also say like, hey, listen, I can open the aperture and get a broader perspective on this. Yeah.
Ah, that's phenomenal. Amazing. Well, Doug, I think we're out of time here, but I think I could probably talk to you for many more hours. This has been amazing. I appreciate your wisdom and your experience so much. I obviously wish you the best of luck and success with Airspeed. Any final words or last messages you want to share with our audience?
No, I just say if anybody wants to try out the apps, you can go to getairspeed.com. They're also in the Slack app store. We will always have a free forever tier, probably up to 50 employees once we start charging next year. And then we're, any and all feedback welcome. We want to help companies build legendary teams and legendary cultures.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Doug. Have a wonderful day.